Democracy Institute. Right. So we are already being live streamed. Great. Great. So thank you, Soumya. Hello, all. I'm excited to welcome you to the panel on youth movements in contemporary Asia. I am Anubha Anushri, the moderator of the event today. This event is being live streamed, and we thank you for tuning in. This panel is organized by the Review of Democracy, Central European University, Budapest, Hungary. Before we begin the discussion, I'd like to thank my team of assistant editors, young, enthusiastic Gen Z, as well as the team at the Review of Democracy who have made this event possible. A big shout out to all of you for holding the line. I'd also like to quickly acknowledge and express solidarity for the victims of the devastation caused by the recent floods in Sri Lanka and Indonesia, the air crisis in India and Bangladesh that many of us have been affected by. The structure of today's event is straightforward. The discussion is about 1.5 hours long. We will open with comments of about 8 to 10 minutes for each of our 4 panelists, which will be followed by some questions from me. We will then open the floor for wider discussion with the audience. You're welcome to use the chat function on YouTube to share your questions, comments, and we will try our best to take them up during the Q&A session. Since we are covering a wide region, we unfortunately do not have time to delve into particular countries, but I encourage you to use the comment section to share your thoughts. Today's topic is very special. The first quarter of the 21st century has been marked by 2 seemingly contradictory political movements. On one hand, we have seen the emergence of what in scholarly literature is known as democratic backsliding, where we have witnessed large-scale and global withdrawal of democratic spaces. The second is the emergence of strong movements organized by and around young people. Just to share some general statistics, according to the United Nations, today there are 1.2 billion young people aged 15 to 24 years, accounting for 16% of the global population. Pertinently, Asia is home to over 1.1 billion young people, representing more than 25% of the continent's population and over 60% of the world's youth, making it the most youthful region globally. South Asia, where 3 of our panelists are located, has the largest population of young people in the world, with 30% of the world's total number of adolescents calling South Asia home. The median age in Asia is 32.5 years, and in South Asia, it is 27.5 years. In Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka combined, it is just around 25. In another startling statistics, young people also form a significant proportion of the total workforce in these countries, ranging from 39% in Sri Lanka to 45% in Bangladesh, 47% in Nepal, and 42% in Indonesia. Politically, too, young people in Asia are much more active. According to a survey conducted by Orb Media, young citizens in Asia are becoming increasingly more likely to participate in protests and demonstrations than their older counterparts by 25%. Indonesia actually ranks highest among other countries in Asia for its youth mobilization. Beyond numbers, young people are taking to the streets in Iran, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Egypt, Indonesia, Morocco, Peru, Paraguay, Kenya, Tanzania, Madagascar, Mongolia, Serbia, South Korea, the United States, Zambia. I could go on and on. The triggers vary from corruption to economic hardships, poor public services to police violence to political repression. Over the last 4 years, South and Southeast Asia have witnessed at least 5 major protest movements, including those in Timor-Leste, Maldives, and the Philippines. Many researchers point out that despite their distinct local context and triggers, these protests share a common thread. Generation Z is the most educated generation in human history, and yet this generation faces severe shrinking of economic opportunities and a sense that their futures have been compromised. Generation Z protests in several Asian countries, not surprisingly then, have been characterized as uprisings against entrenched elite rule, reflecting frustration with decades of corruption, quotaism, nepotism, and oligarchic dominance. Corruption has remained a common trigger across these movements because they make large scale inequalities very visible and personal. Another remarkable feature is how mobilization happens quickly, digitally, creatively, often through pop up protests, flash mobilization, and shared symbols that spread quickly across the borders from pirate flags to straw hats. A generational shift is on display. Instead of policy briefs or manifestos, protesters answer with memes, chants, and dance tracks built for 10 seconds clips organizing. Social media doesn't just express frustration, it also connects young people globally in ways we have never seen before. Taken together, these movements raise bigger questions. Why are youth protests emerging now, and what drives them? How do young people choose to engage politically? What can we learn from these new forms of mobilization for both strengthening democracies across the world as well as the aspirations of younger people? These are some of the questions we will explore today with our panel and you. But before I introduce our speakers, and in keeping with the theme of today's event, I'd like to play a short video that our team has prepared for our audience. The video is a montage of pictures of the different youth movements in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Nepal, and the background score is the punk song Bayar 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 by the Indonesian band Sukatani. Soumya, could you please play the video? Excuse me, Soumya, I don't think I hear the audio. Uh, can you hear the audio, Olin?
No, we don't.
Ah,
I don't.
thanks. Soumya, can you please play that again?
Is there a problem?
Sorry, we couldn't hear the audio, the song. Thank you, and my apologies for not having a full screen. But I hope you'll check out the song and the video that has been compiled by our team. Thank you. And I hope that has refreshed some memories for our participants. I also quickly want to point out how unusual it is to have four women talk about politics in Asia publicly. All our experts today are not just accomplished women, they are activists with deep experience of grassroots mobilization. I'm delighted to welcome and introduce our experts in the order of their presentation. Our first panelist is Sumati Shivamohan, a retired professor of English from the Department of English, University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. Her academic and research interests lie in gender, dispossession, displacement, translation, performance, and film studies. Sumathi is an award-winning filmmaker, performer, playwright, poet, and academic. She has performed widely in Delhi, New York, London, Melbourne, Zurich, and across Sri Lanka. She won the Gratian Prize for English Literature in 2001 and was awarded the Premchand Fellowship by the Sahitya Academy of India in 2011. She's also a committed nonviolent activist for the cause of free education in Sri Lanka. Our second speaker is Dr. Tarana Begum. She's a professor in the Department of Government and Politics at Jahangirnagar University, Bangladesh, with nearly 2 decades of teaching and research experience. Her academic work and teaching spans gender and development, public policy, environmental security, feminist political discourse, peace and conflict, corruption, and women's legal rights. Dr. Begum holds a Master of Science in International Public Administration from Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, Japan, supported by the prestigious Joint Japan/World Bank Scholarship. She is the recipient of the RMIT International PhD Scholarship and was a final nominee for the Commonwealth PhD Scholarship. Her current research focuses on policy responses to violence against women and the gender dimensions of climate change adaptation, building on her earlier work on women's empowerment through handloom programs in Bangladesh. Welcome, Tarana. I'm extremely delighted to introduce our third speaker, Caroline Jacinta Monteiro, who is a feminist activist, researcher, writer, consultant, and producer. She has been working with the women's movement in Indonesia since the 1990s. She has founded several women's organizations and has actively coordinated the Peace Women Volunteer Network, Peace Women across the globe in Indonesia since 2004. In 2011, she founded Arts for Women, a feminist collaborative space connecting activists, artists, art workers, and cultural practitioners. Olin has published over 20 books and zines and has produced 7 women-centered documentaries. She currently facilitates feminism classes and feminist networks, such as Jagat Sitara, Woke Asia Feminist, and the Feminist Art Community, on an online space formed during the pandemic focused on art, creativity, and feminism. Ashmina Ranjit, our final panelist, is Nepal's pioneering artivist, a term she describes as blending conceptual art with feminist activism from the global south. Her process-driven works across painting, printmaking, video performance, and installation confront caste, gender, sexuality, stereotypes, body politics, female marginality, and human rights. During Nepal's civil war, that is the period between 96 and 2006, the country's transition to a democratic republic, her bold public space interventions in Kathmandu brought together soldiers, Maoists, politicians, and ordinary citizens in collective actions against violence, while exposing caste and gender injustices. As visiting faculty at Kathmandu University's Center for the Arts and a key member of Just Futures Pehel, she helps shape curricula on visual narratives of social justice. Ashmina is the founder of Sutra Art Gallery, Gallery 9, Lasana, and Nexus Culture Center, platforms that foster global artistic collaboration. A 2-time Fulbright Scholar and Australia awardee with a MFA from Columbia University, she was named by the Kathmandu Post in 2018 as one of Nepal's 25 modern shapers. Just a quick note, please use the chat function to register your thoughts and comments. We will pick them up at the end of the presentation. Welcome to all of our experts. We first turn to Sumati, we start with Sri Lanka first, with the discussion of the 2022 Aragalaya movement, which seems to have already faded from public memory somewhat. So refresh for our audience, Sumati, some of the wider context, triggers and implications of protest. I'll mute my.
Yeah, I'm Sumadi. Thank you, Anuba, and all of you at Democracy Institute. I'm a bit nervous about starting this off, but I will try my best to do justice to the theme and all of you. The 2022 protest movement brought together different sectors of the population across classes and across ethnicities, across genders, and the youth played a very pivotal, substantial role in spearheading it. But I also want to be a little cautious about calling this a youth-led protest movement, because I mean, there were millions and millions of people participating in it from all walks of life, and there were also political activists from different political parties also taking part, but more as collectives rather than as political parties. So that was the difference this time. There was very little engagement with the political parties themselves. Did not take part as political parties, except when they were quite small or they were very left. So let me kind of set the stage for you. What happened was in 2021, we went into an severe economic crisis with there were global recessions kicking in. The president of the time stopped the import of fertilizers, and he said we have to go organic, but it was actually the economic recession globally that brought it on, and with that also there was no money or whatever it was. There was a severe fuel shortage. So there was transport of goods, and particularly essential goods, and imports of essential goods came to a standstill. So people were stranded; they could not move around. Then there was a cooking gas shortage, a severe cooking gas shortage. So which affected large numbers of people, because even in semi-rural areas, people have moved into using cooking gas. But in urban areas, I mean, people had to stop cooking. They were cooking on balconies, with stoves and makeshift, hearths, makeshift hearths, like with stones and things like that. There were also inordinately long power cuts because of the petrol situation. So all of this came together, and there were people, who could not go to work, or the crops were failing because of the fertilizer ban. And then there were also the power cuts also then brought people, the long queues also brought people almost naturally to the streets, and because there were long queues. And the power cuts also, long power cuts, and they were scheduled power cuts. So you would know, you were given a code, and your power cut would be at that particular time. They were like anything between 2 hours to 4-5 hours. Sometimes at one time it was even 8 hours, I think, for a short period. But so this brought people naturally to the streets. And then you saw people in Colombo, where I kind of, I work in the hill country, but I also come to Colombo. I'm at the moment in Colombo. And in the city, you saw like in kind of street corners and in some by lanes and on the main roads of Colombo, you saw people holding candles and doing some kind of vigil. And then on April 9th, there was a big explosion near the explosion means there was a riot near one of the houses of the president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Now it's very important to know who Rajapaksa is. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is the brother of Mahinda Rajapaksa. It was a dynastic rule, democratically elected, I must say, and that family is supposed to have brought the civil war between the government and the LTT, the Liberation Tigers, to a close in 2009, and they were kind of somewhat very popular. But after the war, their popularity was going down, but they were holding on to it, and they were considered very, very, very corrupt. So people saw them in, these fancy cars while others were struggling. There were all these stories about the kind of lifestyles they led. The sons of the former president, who was the brother of that president, was like, they were running around rioting. I mean, like how young people behaved. They were not that young. They were in their mid-30s to 40s. But and then and they were also seen as very, very corrupt. And then the government was very weak at one time, their government, and then there was an Easter bombing. There was a kind of an Islamist kind of attack on 3 churches and 3 hotels in 2019, which was seen as a collapse of the law and order, and this gave that Mahinda Rajapaksa, the Rajapaksa regime, a new lease of life, because they were seen as militarist, and we need military rules and that kind of law and order rule. And so he was brought in through a huge majority back to power, the Rajapaksas, through this president Gotabaya Rajapaksa. But things didn't change. We went into an economic crisis, so people woke up. Anti-Muslim rhetoric was also on a high at that time, and then so this the protests then moved into, after April 9th, where there was a riot with buses burning, the crowd turned violent. It moved into this esplanade at the center of the city, where all the high-rise, the high 5-star, 7-star hotels were, where city beautification programs were going on at, in full steam. And then there was the recreational place called the Golf Face Green, where people go to relax and children go to play and fly kites and all that. So that place was taken over, and there's a big, fronting the hotels that housed. I mean, one of the big hotels there was Shangri-La, where the president had a suite. So it became this protest. People were protesting there, and they were also staging an occupation. So the occupation then grew into a large-scale occupation. But the initial verve for the occupation came from young people, but they were politically involved young people. So they were part of on the fringe of a radical left-wing party. That's how it started, and environmental activists, they were also young, many of them, and then there was also there were leftists who joined, and then it grew, and as it grew, many different people came in. And I mean, I was a bit surprised at all the statistics. I didn't know there were Sri Lanka had this kind of vibrant youth population. But I could see when, Anamba gave those statistics, how youth were kind of pushed in, kind of took it up as one of the one of the things they could do. It brought meaning to them in a very vibrant, creative way. Because when the Occupy, it was called Gota, the place was called, the occupation was called Gota Go Gama. Gama means village. Gota Go, that was a big slogan. And so this occupation was called, the place was called Gota Go Gama. There was a university, Gota Go Gama University, all tents established. There was an art gallery established. There was music going on, all by the people. You just go and sign up and do your song. There was a film theater where they were screening films. There were also ethnic. There was, particularly by Muslim groups who were feeling very besieged after the Easter bombing, feeling very threatened and targeted. It had started much earlier, but after the Easter Sunday bombings, it was on a high anti-Muslim rhetoric. But so this also gave a lot of Muslim people a space to feel safe, and also to feel that they belong in a very productive way, as very integral, that they had a voice. And so there were also some political parties involved, but they didn't come there as political parties. They came, so there were many different occupations happening. So there were like some rival groups. There was also some rivalry. There was a left wing. Many of them were kind of left wing to liberal to right wing groups also. So they kind of merged. But all anti-corruption was one of the biggest slogans. Everybody was focused on anti-corruption, the corrupt ways of the Rajapaksas. And then there was an impending IMF deal that was going to be made. And the Gotagogama community population was divided on that. Some were not for the IMF deal. Some were for it. Some were like, do not default on our payment because that would bring the IMF. Some were like welcoming the IMF. So it was much more complex than what I'm telling you now. So I can't go into too much detail. On July 9th, there was, although the government stopped, the government unions, pro-government unions did a strike on July 9th because people announced that they were going to all congregate. There was going to be a massive rally on July 9th. And the pro-government unions, workers' unions that were kind of with the government, they started a strike. They said we are going to strike. But then others, like station masters and railway engine drivers, said, no, we will run the trains. And we will run. People walked to the site, even though there were no buses or there were fewer, people hired buses and all. And, there were like, I don't know how many millions, it looked like somebody will have the figure. 10 million, maybe it's not that much, but we were all there. Our university federation, teachers union was there. We also had a tent there. And then somebody from the Catholic community, an artist, young man, when I say young, I don't know, much younger than me, and in his 30s, 40s, I think, because of the Easter, Easter bombings were seen as a shady deal by the government. Some of the revelations were in the investigation were that the government, the Rajapaksa government, were involved in the Easter bombings through funding and trying to create trouble so that they could come back to power. So this guy, this artist, he's a popular actor, he carried the cross and he walked, I don't know, several kilometers over several days, tens and tens of kilometers. Might be like 50, from one of the churches that was bombed to Gotagogama, to this city, to Colombo, carrying the cross, this wooden big, so kind of emulating Jesus. And that also had this big momentum, people walked, they cried, they kind of thought he was second to Jesus, I don't know, right? And then all kinds of things were going on. I want to kind of say that, and a lot of women were involved. I just want to say one thing. The anti-corruption slogan, I think, was limited. It also kind of gave, in the aftermath of it, it gave when it was so, the president left, he fled because when he saw all these people, he didn't know what to do. He was caught. And then, so okay, I'm going to conclude. I just want to say one thing that I think is very, very important. The Gotagogama, this 2022 protests had a history. There were Tamil women, mothers of the disappeared, for instance, were struggling, were protesting in the north of the country where the war had taken place, were protesting for their children who had disappeared during the war, in the last phase of the war. And it's normally captured as a ethnic thing, these mothers are struggling for asking for what happened to their children as Tamil mothers. But I also want to look at that as an economic issue as much as it's an ethnic issue, and a gender issue, and a class issue, as much as a ethnic issue, and that gets done. Then there were microfinance. That particular year, not to leading up to 2022, in 2021, there were two other struggles that were very important. Women fighting against microfinance credit, because that was eating into it. It became a huge crisis, and it still is today. I mean, as I speak. So these struggles, and the farmers' struggles again in 2021, these were not in Colombo, and I think we can't forget that, because those were like what was kind of fueling. I mean, those were and those are still here with us. I also want to say, outside of Gota Gogama protests, there were also peripheral protests, and two of them were in Tamil and Muslim-dominated areas, in sync with this protest. Okay, I want that to be flagged, because I think what has happened, I mean, when we talk of youth, sometimes we also tend to, at least in Sri Lanka, we have kind of depoliticized the youth. And I think kind of getting youth back into a political configuration and a formulation is very important. I want to stress the idea of women, but I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Sumati, and I'm so sorry for rushing you off the stage, because we have 3 more speakers lined up, and we'd like to distribute our time carefully. And also thank you for pointing out to the centrality of art and artistic installations and artists in conjuring, prompting, and promoting these protests in specific directions. So from moving on to Sri Lanka to now Bangladesh, I now invite Dr. Tarana Begum. Please walk us through some of the broad context and triggers that shaped the monsoon uprising, the 2024 youth movement in Bangladesh. Dr. Begum, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anuha. Good afternoon, everyone. It's almost evening here. So, and also I thank the Central CEU Democracy Institute for inviting me. So if I can share my slide here for a brief, just a minute. Okay, I want to share if it's okay. Is it sharing? No.
Yes, we can see your slides. You can do.
Just I'll go. I have 5 minutes or 8 minutes.
About 5 to 8 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. I'll describe it very briefly. Thanks for time. And under this broad, okay. I'm just minimizing this one. Under this broad umbrella of fighting for democracies and youth movements in contemporary Asia, I will just present my quota movement project. Just a highlight is about, my title is just from quota protest to youth uprising in Bangladesh in 2024. So from the beginning, I just started in 2024, Bangladesh experienced witnessed a historic student uprising, and it alleged the fall of the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and and her time expanded from 2009 to 2024, and what because this student protest, this it started from unequal government job quotas for freedom fighters and their family members, they saw their children and girl children. It was about 35% quota for the freedom fighters, family members, and even for grandchildren, and around for more than 45% quota for the government job, and the rest of the for general student. So this quota movement quickly then transferred into from quota movement to it's transformed into the nationwide a democratic movement, and so then youth-led mobilization actually challenged the state party or state. It was a spark against repression, systematic repression, unequal distribution of wealth, and electoral manipulation, as well as long-standing denial of political and voting rights of youth, especially youth. Like from 2009 to 2024, they just there was out of practicing their voting rights and everything. So it's anger among this young generation. So youth-led movements directly challenge state repression, and this violent repression response actually of state expose and main problem was there the state party. They have just failed to handle the situation, um, uh, and their violent response just lead these state expose serious failure and of governance and legitimacy, and turning a policy change into a broader struggle of democracy. And okay, then mainly 2024 student uprising in Bangladesh then lead to fall of Sheikh Hasina regime, and when the collapse ultimately it's collapsed the authoritarian regime, and changes and formation of after that 5 August is lead to formation of interim government. It clearly demonstrates that the transformative power of youth activism and just played a very vital role. And this is not a isolated matter, isolated case for Bangladesh. Similar incidents happen in Sri Lanka, and then after Bangladesh in Nepal also. So it's a big like it causes that this form of uprising in Bangladesh mainly happened due to the inequality and then corruption in development projects. Similar in Nepal and Sri Lanka also, some mega projects, corruption also, and like this on. So this transition definitely, I think, were more just very systematic, and it raised several critical questions, and I think it's required a broader research on this. So we just formed a research project under our Faculty of Social Science, Jamina University. So this my project actually we try to search several questions that why did you protest intensify in Bangladesh in 2024? As we already mentioned, there's corruption and political voting manipulation, judicial independence, other things also hampered, many more things are there. So how and why these protests intensified actually in 2024? How did actually government or ruling party respond to this student movement, and the violence reaction and just and negligence actually create this sort of violent uprising actually in Bangladesh. And this was democracy, and we think there's Sheikh Hasina there's a democracy affected the environment, how yes it environment, and also how did students respond to unequal job quotas and threats to voting rights, and there is now big questions in our current situation and political situation after maybe in 2026 February there a national election, but it's still situation is out of control of the central government. So there is a big question how this change or uprising is really good, anything good for democracy, or can you lead protest to help restore the democracy after the July uprising, or it will create more violent situation in Bangladesh or not? So in this due to time still, I just want to skip this. Just if you just look over Bangladesh democratic transition from after 1971 independence, Bangladesh went through the Bangladesh adopted as a parliamentary form of democracy, president, prime minister led government, and during the Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. In 1974, the fourth constitutional amendment actually started centralizing power, and we can judicial independence, also introduce presidential form of government, and established one party system. And as a consequence, in 1975, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and most of his family members were assassinated, followed by military coup. And from 1975 to 2000 and 1990s, Bangladesh went through repeated like coups, counter coups, and in 19 under 90 after 1990s mass movement, Bangladesh just in 1991 we just after mass popular protest, the restoration of parliamentary democracy just restored in 1991. And after that, what's happened that, sorry. And from 1991 to 2009, mainly two major political party, Bangladesh Awami League and Bangladesh Nationalist Party, mainly was in, just dominance of two parties there, and also there was a regular election, but vote rigging also there. And in the meantime, Bangladesh formed the caretaker election under caretaker system. But during Sheikh Hasina in 2021, the government abolished the caretaker government system, and it sparked the caretaker system. Actually, they just take control of the electoral system, and as a consequence, during Sheikh Hasina period 2014, 2018, and 2024 election actually become very widely questioned by the opposition, marginalists are excluded, and dummy elections, and also independent party and voting rigging and youth engagement was very low. So this is part just a sort of apathy among young generation. And after Sheikh Hasina rule, as you also selected, suppression, manipulation, politicization, and control over media. Everything just turned the democracy, it's turned the democratic government into a sort of authoritarian practices is that. So after also human rights and violation of systematic violation, extrajudicial killing, disappearance is post from enforced disappearance through the law enforcement agencies, detention, security agencies acted as with impunity. So many more things actually triggered just apathy, and also okay. Okay, okay. After the due to this sort of 1 minute.
Yeah, please go ahead,
Okay,
conclude.
okay. Then after this sort of controversial elections and restricted freedom, press freedom, and judicial and opposition protests have largely state institutions control just sparked the movement, and in 2024, okay, I can go after this because of I just my proposal here was research was like what is the causes and the consequences of this movement. So this is after they did a popular place, and okay, then this is the government is a Gonobobon, and it's a burning. So what happened that youth movements yesterday just raised voice actually raised against job quota, democratic accountability, voting rights, corruption against, and also against extrajudicial killing. And after this, okay, these this situation, like the excessive disappropriate force, and the government agency many violence like intensified the public anger and strengthened national solidarity. Also, government agency failed to anticipate the public reaction to the prime minister reference to protesting a student as Rajakar or collaborator, and brutal crackdown by the government just backfired, and student protest spread beyond the university campus to the wider society, and regime actually Sheikh Hasina regime then lost their moral and political legitimacy and collapsed under the mass resistance. And so this is the main thing. So the what was causes and of under this, and maybe we will go through the so okay, it's time actually almost over thing that thank you. So this is my finances as the government actually failed to um, to address
Perfect.
the public reaction, and thank you very much.
Perfect. So thank you for this wide history, the background of 2024 movement. From that, I'd now like to quickly turn to our third expert, Olin. Dr. Monitiro, Indonesia has been experiencing protests for some time now, and the most recent one being the July 2025 movement, when Indonesian lawmakers granted themselves new allowances while daily prices soared. So going beyond the headlines, what are some of the factors behind the repeated mobilization of young people in Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to this important discussion. But first, I would like to draw the political movement, the civil society movement, and also the youth movement have gone back in the year 70s, I think, because of the repression of our second president, Suharto, in the 70s. So I think the young people have already been protested for over decades in Indonesia. So it's not just this year or the past few years. But I think what you said, the backsliding of democracy in Indonesia is already engineered by our previous president, Joko Widodo, which is in his first 5 years of his government, he already started to engineer all these new law reform, which enhance the power abuse and also the capacity of big oligarchy company to co-operate Indonesian economy back into, I think it's 2016 or 2017. So it's already started the engineering of this collapse of the democracy system in Indonesia. So yeah, and then the first round of the youth movement emerging started in 2019, where back then, that's just 1 year before COVID, the president approved the change of the corruption law, which decrease the corruption commission authority to arrest all these corruptors. So I think it's similar with India that we just heard before the first presentation. In Indonesia, corruption is also one of the major problem in our democracy system. So the power abuse, the corruption, and of course the failure of this reformation period, what we struggled in 1998, where the change from one regime to another actually just enhance the power of this certain oligarchy elite in Indonesia, in our economy capital in Indonesia. So yeah, I think it started already a few years, but this year particularly, you heard the song from Sukatani band who were almost arrested by the police department in Indonesia this early 2025 because their song is obviously protesting against the police department in Indonesia, which abuse their power and have the most corrupted institution of the government in Indonesia. And we know this like for a long time. But I think the young people now are disappointed because there are so many regulations that I think doesn't defend the rights of the people. For example, last year, the government also approved this bylaw on the labor force in Indonesia, and that will increase the tax, that will increase all this regulation that will be benefiting only for the company, but not for the worker, for example. So I think young people now are very expressive, especially the Gen Millennial and Gen Z in Indonesia. They are like half of the population of Indonesia now, the Gen Z and the Gen Millennium. So yeah, they are the working force, the active working force in Indonesia, and all of this situation happening in our legislative, the law that increasingly only supporting the capitalists, what we can say that here in Indonesia, only like a very small amount of percentage of people who own Indonesia, we can say. So yeah, I think people are disappointed with the situation. And this year, particularly, there's a moment in the mid-year of 2025 where the parliament people wants to upgrade their paycheck, their salary. And there's a video of it where they are dancing, singing, and blah, blah, blah. And it was really viral. So I think it started the protest again in 2025 because of that. And in August 25th or 26th, yeah, there's this peace protest by the young people. And during the protest, one of these, how do you call it? So we have this motorbike rent. We call it ojek in Indonesia. He was he was how do you say it? Crushed by a police mobile, yeah, during this protest. So after this protest, then all over Indonesia and different islands, the young people organized together the protest, and then it started the big riots and everything by the end of August. With hundreds of people was arrested, including young people as young as 16 years old, was arrested, and then they were treated very bad during this unrest, and also some people died, like 4 people died during this protest, and then it created anger all over Indonesia because of this, and also I think there are problem with all these government programs. So what we call the return of the police and military forces into the civil service work of the Indonesian government. So this return also create anger where people who are not qualified to do their jobs are inside the government doing the jobs, which creates problems. So we have more environment destruction because of the company who are doing this national strategic project, which um, capture all the land from the indigenous people, and also there are some conflict between the government and the local people on all this mining company, and also of course the palm oil problems in Indonesia, which later created the disaster, the flood and landslide in Sumatra Island, also because of this palm oil expansion in Sumatra Island that captured so many our natural forests, yeah, in Sumatra. So yeah, I think there are so many problems upon problems upon problems. Then it created the mass anger in at the late of August 2025. And now some of the activists are on trial. I just returned today from one of the trials of the young people. So just for your information, the people who are trial are very, very young people from 17 years old to like 26 or 27 years old in general. So basically the Gen Z are arrested and then they are trial because of the chaos situation happening in August 2025. And I think lack of understanding of people about what happened in our government is also shown in the a very little education on human rights, politics, and of course law, understanding of law, yeah, in our people in Indonesia, making it very difficult for people to understand their rights, that they are not supposed to be arrested because they are protesting, and protesting is also it's all protected by our law. We have a national human rights law regulation also, but people also, I think, didn't remember that we have our rights. Yeah. So yeah, basically that, and then I think before I finish, I'm just going to say that for the women movement themselves, the past 20 years have been very, very productive because we have produced a few gender-based policy. For example, policy related to domestic violence, and then trafficking, and the last one in 2022, we have been we succeeded in uh, passing the anti-sexual violence bill. So I think the women's movement are going stronger now, and we work very closely with the young people, with the disability groups, with the women's indigenous groups. So sometimes with one advocacy, we could create a bigger advocacy and solidarity. And this is very important, to have an intergenerational uh, uh, movement working together closely to make sure that we could, reach the goal as a civil society now in this the cleaning of our democracy in Indonesia. I think that's about it just for now, and hopefully we could discuss more in the question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Olin, for that very heterogeneous and rich summary of what happened in Indonesia in the recent past. I'd like now to quickly turn to Ashmina. And I know you've been an active and vocal participant in the recent movement in Nepal. So tell us what have been some of the most important factors behind the September confrontations in Kathmandu. How would you describe the recent upsurge?
Thank you, Anuba, and inviting me for this important panel. Really appreciated. Let me start with remembering the September 8th, the brightest day turned into the darkest night. So we still remember September 8th as a darkest day in Nepal. And, heartfelt condolence to all the families of those children who was shot dead, and all the people who has lost their life, their families, and I really wanted to remember them. So why that happened? What is the context? The Nepal. What is how Nepali people are living? What is their life like? So these are the things maybe we have to go back. How we, our society, our politics, our culture, everything, how it is. How everyone is breathing in the context, So Nepal is a very sexist, very casteist, and very dominated by Brahminical, patriarchal structure. It's a structurally, it is. Some of the people are benefited more than anybody. And we Nepalese people like to say we are never colonized by the outsider, but we are colonized by outsider in very different way, which is visibly invisible or invisibly visible, let's say that way. And we are colonized by our own people, from Sahas, Ranas, and Brahmins, or the highest caste, so-called high caste people. And they are the one who has been ruling our country for centuries. And if you look at, I have witnessed from monarchy, absolute monarchy, to democracy, to insurgency or people wars, whoever looking at, however they want to describe, people's war, then democracy, and then a republican state now we are. But who are the rulers? Who are on the power? Same people. System changed, but the people are same. They are ruling. Whether you are looked at the judiciary, bureaucracy, everywhere, these are the people who are really ruling. And then corruptions and political leaders, I don't even want to call them leaders. They may be leaders for some of the small group of people or the party or their own cadres, but they are not national leaders. They are politicians. They are gestures. They really never thought about the people from the ground, people from the marginalized. Of course, during the Maoist movement, all these issues became in the front line or the center, but it subsided as soon as they got into power. And the power, how it corrupted everyone, even who really thought they were the leaders. And so these are the context, and then the corruptions and all these things. And also another aspect of things which people might not like to say, but our economy depends on the large amount from the remittance. And from the very beginning, from the when British are ruling in India and Nepal, where the Rana regimes, how they took powers, they started sending Gurkhas, but in the army. And that's the part of like where the colonizations, how the negotiation happens and how it is kind of gone that. And then if you look at every children, when you talk to the education system, to everything, Their goal is always after the 12, I'm going to go somewhere, it depending on the caste, class, and gender, and so many other things. Their target is always to go. And all these gestures, all this politicians, how they kind of don't want youth to be here, because if the youths are here, it is the problematic for them. So they want their one cadres, their one kind of people, which is ridiculous. And then this September 8th, just before that, for the Genjis, we all know the internet or the virtual space is their space. For them, it's like oxygen. And then suddenly our prime minister then ban the social media corruptions, and there these changes were doing like anti-corruption nepo kids, how corruptions is, and all these things were happening. And they when they banned the social media, they kind of, it's like, again, I'm telling you, I mean, saying it again, like it's like oxygen for them. So they gather together, and they started as a simple protest. And this protest, how it kind of how the simple protest, the expectations, government really thought, who were in the government, they thought, oh, these kids, they're just like making noise, so we can really and there won't be many people. But the students in the uniform from all over, how they come and join the simple protest, and government could not really kind of stop them going into the parliament building. And then I mean, our prime minister or home minister or whoever in the power, they basically massacred the whole kid. I mean, 22 plus kids, and many people injured, and they shot in their head and chest, and it's the massacre. And then this simple protest turned into, it was Genji protest, and then it turned into the big movement. And it's not only Genji's movement from the second day, because the whole parents, their families, the people, whoever, the citizens, they kind of like, no, this is not going to I mean, we are not going to accept this. So the simple protest turned into movement. And here I have been always saying, this youth went to fishing for the trout. They got the whale, and they were chased by the whale was chased by the sharks. And these sharks, whoever in the government, and it kind of really turned. And these changes, they didn't know what to do, because it's beyond their imagination. They just wanted, like, okay, we are talking about this anti-corruptions and this social media ban and all these things, and they took it very lightly. And that movement really, and also because as the situation became volatile, and then all the other forces, political parties, and all these other, from the government to other, all the political parties started taking a chance, started hijacking the movement. And then they started really burning everything, like all these government buildings to people's property, they kind of selected. And it's all like, it's became like a really mess. So I would not just say this is Gen Z movement. Rather, the protest turned into, and it's not solely Gen Z's movement now, and then so this things happen, and then so through the this cyberspace itself, they kind of selected like this. This could be the prime minister. So many debates and all these things. Everybody wanted to get into power somehow. The current prime minister, who used to be chief justice, and she became a prime minister, and also Genji is not a homogeneous group, so every party started like their Genji group. Genji Maoist, Genji MLA, Genji monarchist, Genji this. So they played another big game of divide and defeat, divide and rule. So the kind of like the space became even more volatile, and people might celebrate like, oh my god, we have a prime minister who is like the woman, but sometimes you could be in the woman's body but may not think as a feminist perspective, as a kind of the same kind of patriarchal casteist, classes, class, how they kind of, so this kind of thing is still happening. And it's been 3 months, almost 3 months, almost 100 days by like day after tomorrow or so. And all these things happening, and it's chaotic. People are trying to hijack the movement, and also the government, who kind of gone down after the 2 days, second days of protest. They are kind of trying to come up, and how other agencies are trying to kind of hijack this is really sad. I mean, it's hopeful
Yeah,
because it's very hopeful because young people started taking interest in the politics, which was always saying, oh, this is a dirty game we don't want to hear about, we have nothing to do with politics. They started. So that force is very important, how to kind of really keep the energies flows. But at the same time, they were scattered, they have been scattered, they have been divided, the quarrel, the things, all these things is going on, and who is benefiting from it, how it
Ashwina,
is going to happen. So this is again the very volatile state. We are hopeful, but yet very scary scenario here. I think I'll stop here, then we'll talk about again.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ashwina, for that very provocative response presentation. And before I move on to my questions, I encourage our audience to please share your comments and questions with us in the chat box. We don't have much time, but I'll try to include as many questions and comments as possible for our speakers. As I was listening you guys talk, there was one commonality between all of four of you was how this label of youth movement, of Gen Z movement, is actually not most accurate. In fact, all of you highlighted the heterogeneity of mobilization. But the other thing that I thought was very common in all your presentations was the role of different social groups, including gender groups. And I'd like you guys to talk more about this since you're all women activists. And so my first question to you is related to gender and youth mobilization in your respective countries. It does seem to me that women were at the forefront of all these movements. And so how do you think have these movements addressed the gender aspirations of young people? And what's the broader impulse in these movements towards progressive gender reforms? So we'll start with Sumati first quickly.
Okay, very quickly, what I want to say is is that okay? Did I interrupt you? No. Okay. So where I have I have kind of I want to apply caution on the idea of Gen Z and youth movement per se, because this also there's a political content to all of it. But where I think the youth movement has some traction for me is that we see young women taking on unofficial leadership roles. And this is where I think there is a break, or there is a difference between older struggles or previous struggles where women had participated integrally, but men had been the leaders. But here we find there is no one leadership, there's no one leader, and they didn't even claim to have leaders. But there were women at the forefront, and these were relatively young women. I can't say they were very, very young. So I would like to kind of bring youth and women together, and this is where I think kind of years of feminist thinking, despite their problems, feminist movement has had its problems, and it has kind of stayed within kind of urban areas in some ways, or has been kind of top down in other ways. But despite their activism has kind of made an inroad into ordinary people's, ordinary women's lives, at least in the thinking. It's still class oriented. I think these leaderships and youth movements are still very much informed by class kind of connotations, particularly middle class. So even when we say youth, I think there's a middle classness to it. And we also see women as I said earlier, in the microfinance struggle that kind of was simultaneous to the Occupy Gotagama movement, and also the walk for justice in Batticaloa by Tamil and Muslim women. In the they were ethnicity-wise, they were also not mainstream ethnicity, but also was spearheaded by women. And that walk, I think, has continued to this day. I mean, every day they walk. From the 2022, and I'm not sure whether they've stopped it, but they were walking every day up to almost to date. So that's very remarkable.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to Tarana. Tarana, can you hear me? So how about you pick up the question of gender and the movement, Olin?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think the emerging of the feminist movement in Indonesia started. I mean, the contemporary feminist movement in Indonesia started in 1998, where from there we have so many women's organization, feminist organization, because back then people not really comfortable with the word feminist in Indonesia, so they want to call themselves women activists or just activists or human rights activists or something like that. But the difference with the past 10 or 15 years, I think now the young women are more happy to express themselves as I'm a feminist, or even I also meet some of transgender activists. I'm a transgender, and they are very vocal and expressing themselves, especially in the social media. So I think that's the difference between the feminist movement in the 98 when I was Gen Z back then. Now my son is a Gen Z human rights activist. So the feminist movement the past 20 or 30 years now are fostering the younger human rights activists. And a friend of mine, one of the feminist activists, friend of mine, her son was arrested back in March this year. So yeah, that happened before we watch our friend was arrested. Now we watch our children arrested. So I think the yeah, I don't know if I could say this, but I think the feminist movement have been also fast fostering all the other minority groups. For example, my organization before, the Jurnal Perempuan or the the first feminist journal in Indonesia, was hosting this youth program and also providing support and also advocacy for the queer community back then, the past 15 years, I think. So yeah, I think the feminist movement have been trying to also embrace all the minority group, disability groups, queer, youth movement, indigenous women, for example, to lead also in the process of the democracy and feminist movement in Indonesia, because I think the problem now is how we share our stage, what we said. Could feminist movement share the stage with the other minority groups like disability groups, queer, the lesbian, the transgender, the trans men, queer activists and indigenous activists, for example, because this is the question that started in 1998. But now I think we are progressing into a period where we wanted also to voice the voiceless, that just not just the women's group, but also the other minority group. And I think the feminist movement in Indonesia tried to pioneer on how we could also provide the stage and the leading of this minority group. And I think also in the face of our chaotic democracy process now, the feminist movement also has a role on how to understand the difficulty of this gender and democracy power dynamic. Especially now we are talking about the distribution of knowledge and distribution of access, because Indonesia is many islands. That's from Aceh to Papua, very big geographical state. If you're saying that now we are also thinking about disaster in Sumatra, for example. All our human resources are going there, our fundraising are going there, and we try to be like a solid movement, yeah, now to try to overcome the problems that we are having. So yeah, I think the feminist movement in Indonesia now are trying to be a more, what I call myself, I call intergenerational and adaptive feminist approach, where we could adapt to the certain situations. For example, now we have to also talk about climate change in this democracy process, for example. And how do we do this? We have some plan for the next few years. We will be hosting different democracy process next year due to the problem with all this political situation now. And yeah, we do hope we could also support the democracy process as a whole, as a civil society movement. So how to make the civil society movement much more working together, yeah, instead of working in their own box, in their own. Thank you.
Yeah, the literature on protest is very robust. It's now very conforming to what you were outlining, the kind of care work, the kind of solidarity, capacious solidarity that women protesters generally introduce in these mobilizational spaces. It's unfortunate that we have not heard from Tarana. I don't think that probably is a problem in a connection, not heard back from her. It would have been very interesting to hear from her, especially because there's been such a different experience with regard to the intersection of women, gender, the question of gender, and equal participation and representation of women in post-revolutionary, post-mobilization space in Bangladesh. But we'll move on quickly to Ashmina, who I'm sure has a lot to say about this. So please, Ashmina, tell us, where do you see the protest? I know it's too nascent, but how has this protest, the September protest, addressed gender, the question of gender progression in Nepal? Yeah, you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. with the movement, with this September movement, and before also, we had like 33% participation in women's participation in parliament. But later that is kind of reduced into whatever number. And then what happened? Sorry. And then in this movement, Genjis and other movement as well, there are many women, leaders were there who were always doing groundwork and all these things. But when it comes to stage, the centering, then they are always pushed aside. And that is still the case. If we look at the current government, we have the women prime minister, but who is she has brought into the cabinet? All men. Most of them are from high caste class and all these things. So it just doesn't talk the spirit of the movement. On that note, I wanted to read two small poems, which is written by, no, they are the freedom fighters from India. One is Waharu Sonawa, and the another one is in his poem, Bharat Patangar, he actually responded. And these are beautiful. It's from the Dalit Adivasi excluded group, how they kind of, during the movement, they wrote it. And Prachi, our friend, actually just read it a few days ago. And I thought, oh my God, it kind of speak to everyone, every marginalized community, persons, like the whole. So I'll just read that. It is by the Adivasi movement, freedom fighters. I'm just starting. We didn't go to the stage, nor were we called. With a wave of the hands, we were shown our place. There we sat, and we were congratulated. And they, standing on the stage, went on telling us of our sorrows. Our sorrows remained ours. They never became theirs. When we whispered our doubts, they perked their ears to listen and ceased tweaking our ears, told us to shut up, apologize, or else. And the another in his this poem, the response from the Bharat Patangar, he is another brilliant freedom fighter. So he said, he writes, at last, we did take over the stage. They were quite confused. Sorry, I'm just trying to read this. They were quite confused. Sorry, my screen is playing a bit, so I'm just... Slowly, they looked at the masses in front of them, and instead of frowning, their eyes met the ground beneath them. They said to themselves, now it will be difficult to get these people off the stage. They put their hands on our backs and said, we are happy that this happened. We wanted the same thing, really. And then they started plotting the game of swallowing us all together. And this is exactly what is happening. It's whether it's come about the women's feminist, or the Dalits, or the Adivasis, or any other geographical and other any otherwise, all the marginalized people are pushed aside, and they always made these conspiracies, like, the how to swallow the things, and they remain, and for hundreds of years that's how they are ruling, and that is what happening here. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I really enjoyed listening to Bharat Patankar. That poem really reminded me of his other works, which have been brilliant,
Yeah.
like you rightly said.
Yeah.
We don't have so much time, but we're just going to extend the conversation for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll have a hard stop because I did want to address some of the interesting questions that are floating in the chat box. So the first question is from Shaista Sami. And this is again a question to all of you, and Sumati, maybe you can try addressing this. What implications, because we are sort of like 2 years, 3 years down the line now from the Ragalaya movement, what implications is this movement likely to have in the future? So I'm assuming she means social implications, this movement.
Okay, one thing is it has brought about democracy and people's action, like a real thing, that you can have democratic action and it can have results. Otherwise, people were very downhearted, downcast. So this had brought about hope, and there was a change of government in the last year. So that was kind of a really new brand, like a brand new party. There are problems, but still, that we could change the government and we could get the president to flee was very heartwarming. The struggle continues, and people are mobilizing in their own ways. It's splintered now. But that we can organize is one of the big takeaways that we have here. Yeah. I also want to say something I forgot before. I should mention it when Olin or somebody was speaking. One of the things that we can talk about youth is the sexuality, the queer movement that was kind of very central. The radical, the queer movement is not one. It's heterogeneous, so we have movements. But they also did the queer movement, the radical queer movement was also very central to the struggle in many different ways. I can't go into it all now, but I thought I had it in my notes. I couldn't mention it, and I want to flag it here very much. And that is also one. And again, one of the other things is that bringing together all the different communities does not mean the ethnic conflict has gone away, or it doesn't mean that. But we saw a moment in a very highly ethnicized, polarized community. We saw, there was a moment when people came together. Things are not okay. That doesn't mean it's okay. There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of anti-Muslim, anti-Tamil rhetoric going on. But it's also, we haven't gone back to that stage when there were riots against minorities. It might happen, but we know what to do now, maybe.
That's very optimistic, I dare say.
I think it's too optimistic, but I just want to end on a high note.
Thank you. Thank you for that encouragement. Ashmina, would you like to go? Would you like to address this question about what's the future? Sort of, again, this is a very, I know, transitory space in Nepal, but if you could sort of take a stab at what do you think is the movement going to look like, let's say a month from now?
Yeah, in 3 months, we have the election coming. The situation is very volatile, but there are several new parties, including Genjis, how they kind of started going into this politics, coming really strongly. And also there are so many women who is strongly coming. I hope they get the center space. That's the hope. But I am hopeful, and we have to be hopeful. Our struggle is going to go for a really long time. I mean, that's for sure. But I'm hopeful, and then I'm thinking about the positive note. And also, we artists, some of my previous students who is like established artists now, we are trying to do like kind of somehow, constant parallel movement through the art, so that we can kind of knock them, hey, we still are here, or how to bring the voice louder, kind of make it. So I'm positive. We have to be positive. Otherwise, otherwise we can't stand. Our standing itself, and all the youth standing itself, is the resilience. Like that's the protest, and that has to be there. So I'm very positive in that context. Thank you.
Thank you. That's actually, as you were talking, I was quite struck by, again, the parallels in all the presentations. It's not just that women think in terms of care and solidarity, even in volatile times. They also think with patience, and protest is not necessarily associated with patience. So I'm very glad you bring up this highly sparse, but very essential democratic quality of patience in the conversation. Olin has been unable to join us because she has to leave very quickly. And she wrote in the chat a response to the question. This is what she says, I quote her: "I think we need to build a new architecture for our more equal democracy. It's a long way to go. Democracy is a long process." So again, reflecting on the broader quality of patience that's required to build what she calls as new architecture of democracy. We have a second question from another audience, Charulika.
Can I just say one more thing about
Please.
as I started, like how our society is casteist, sexist, and like how Brahminical patriarchy is ruling. In that context, even in the Gen Z's movement, if we see, most of the Gen Zs who is getting into centers are still high caste, high class, and those are kind of left behind, Dalits, women, Janjatis, they are kind of left behind. So we need to bring them into center. It has to change. Otherwise, the revolution after revolution after revolution, it's never going to go into the thing. So we need to bring that. And how can we make it happen? That's the big struggle, but we need to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's not even a revolution then. I do want to quickly move on to the next question. Which is a question from Charulika, uh, how does revolutionary memory operate today as a counter-hegemonic force or as a technology of state legitimation? So I think it's something similar to what Ashmina, you were saying as in your last comment. Would anybody would like to respond to this question? Okay, we'll move on very quickly because we are very kind of short on time. I'm so sorry, Charulika. Maybe we'll probably get back to you with some reflections on that wonderful question. There's another question from my assistant editor, Soumya. Her question is on technology. We saw use of anime like One Piece, and I think that's a question probably to Ashmina and Olin. We saw use of anime like One Piece or pop culture references used in recent protests in Nepal and Indonesia. How do you think these global cultural symbols translate into local political language? And I did want to piggyback on this question with my question, which I was very interested and curious about as you guys were talking. I wondered if each of you could talk very quickly about specific art and artistic forms that transform the mobilization space, whether they were art installations or technology augmented art.
shall I go just quickly? Because of all these memes and all these symbols, international symbols, or the language of Genji, I would say that. So there is a big gap between the leaders, whoever, and the Genjis, how they were using those language. There are so much gulf, a huge gulf between that. Because of that, they could not understand actually how the Genji were starting the whole movement and how they are thinking, because they didn't understand the whole thing. That's how they missed the whole the essence of it. And so I think the huge gap in that language barrier, it's not the same. Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, thank you.
Sumati or Tarana, since we do not have Olin here.
Okay, can I go? Is Tarana here? Okay, I'll just go. So I did talk about the art forms before, but I just want to say that apart from that, because those were the tens, there was an art gallery which was kind of very successful because people could go and, you didn't need to be an artist, you could go and make art there, and it was one of the most successful ones. But there were performances, there was street theater performances going on all over. It was like a carnival. So there was a carnival. It had that, because of all that energy, and maybe because there were all these young people. I don't know. I don't know now that you've asked this question about youth. I want to kind of see whether it was also about young people. But it was also like a carnival. It was like a recreation. I mean, if you went there, it was like, all the ice cream vendors and all of those having a field day. So it was like, so that space is anyway a recreational space where people come, in the evenings. So, and this was turned into a political recreational space. The other thing I wanted to kind of highlight is the chants were not the kind of fuddy-duddy chants like down with this or down with, everybody's used to, but they were very creative. People made up those chants. Now, I don't want to go into some of the chants that I didn't like. They'll be too complicated, but they were all like people. They came from the, how people felt. So they were funny and it caught the imagination. So, so people would chant and then the passing vehicles would honk to that rhythm. So there would be a back and forth between the people, the protesters chanting, and there would be like, hundreds of people at any given time. And then the vehicles would honk. Then I told you about that performance of the guy who, Jehana Puhami, who carried the cross. That was like very imaginative. And that kind of artistic experiments are still going on. They're kind of more in the gallery spaces or small gallery spaces. So I did end on a high before you said it was too optimistic. I think we are going, many, the prognosis is that we would go into another economic crisis in the coming years. So it's not that, but our struggle, we have to be prepared for the struggle. That's what I mean. It's not going to be easy. I have my own criticism of the government. We are going to, we have the IMF kind of over our heads. So kind of looming and dictating terms and all of that. But if we have an economic crisis, we are already in one now. How prepared are we? And we need to kind of have a political content, a better political content, but with the same energy.
Tarana, do you want to take that question up?
The question, can you repeat please the question?
The question was broadly based on art and the space that the movements gave to creative sort of responses to protesting, to organized mobilization.
And I just just from our current Bangladesh situation. So during this student protest and this also the uprising, We joined this movement too and support it. But the current situation, like if I say the overall impact of our movement, there is some political parties, like leading political parties like Bangladesh Nationalist Parties and Jamaat Islamists. They're trying to snatch the credit, and in the meantime, there is another. I'm not actually optimistic about this whole situation. In this movement, leftist political parties and also teachers, civil society, also from a different segment of the population, support it. But now, whole interim government or the decision, and we just being lovely laureate with Dr. Yunus as a chief advisor, but still there is like a sort of conflict or something. They are they going to free fair through the free fair election or not? Some the rise of religion-based politics and who opposes the party who opposes our liberation war. They are trying to the force. They're trying to they just the hidden politics and underground politics and some activities are there, and also one thing raised there, the mob justice. That's you are just uncertain. Sometimes you just write a single word or something, or just opposes the government policies or actions. If you write anything and there is a chance 80% cases there's people students or people just create mob justice in your home and vandalize everything. There is this uncertainty. All of the thousands of police officers are killed. There is no justice for this, and there is no rule of law. People are arrested without any. There is no bail system or everything. So it's total situation is confusing. When I write these slides, I need you to skip a lot of things and just a controversy, and that can create like a sort of security issues. And even for say one of our they are students in our public in a public university. Students are there just they collapse everything, administration every single day or every week they just locked the administrative building. And yeah, our next week we have our admission test, and but students that who are demanding just to exclude some of our colleagues for their allegation of with the or with the past.
Sorry for interrupting you, Tarana. I know
Okay.
you're sharing something very
So the whole situation is not actually just very comforting. So, but we hope after election, maybe we'll get, if we get a political government, maybe we can go for something better.
Yeah,
Time
thank you
maybe.
for sharing your concern, Tarana. And I wish we had more time to delve deeper into this. But Ashmina wanted to quickly get back to the question of art, space of art in these protest movements. So, Ashmina, let's hear from you quickly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to say, like, I was talking about like how the language of changes, how they uses memes and like words, and the language gap was there. But art has been always central to the many of movement. And if you look at my journey, I mean, for last 30 years plus, I have been using art as a protest and bringing, the people and the government, and in many different ways. So art has always been central in that case. I just wanted to add that one thing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So it's about time for us to wrap up this discussion, and we really need to conclude this because our original time was 8:30. But as four women, when they get together, time is not really the limit. I'm so glad we had this conversation because we did bring out in the discussion the fact that there's volatility, there's uncertainty. There's a lot of instability, economic hardship that protests have led to. But there's also this other, space of protests where this is a space of art, of thoughtfulness, of care and solidarity, and most importantly, I guess, patience and optimism. And Tarana and I know Olin is not here with us right now, but should agree with us that all these movements show the coexistence of both these spaces. With that, I'd like to thank each one of you for taking time to be with us here today. I'd also like to thank our audience for tuning in and sharing your thoughts with us for this engaged participation. And lastly, thank you to my team for helping me put this together. I hope you enjoyed listening to the discussion, and I wish you a safe, thoughtful evening.
Thank you, Anubha.
Thank you.
Thanks to all here.
Thank you, Anubha. Thanks you.